Hi, well, welcome to all of you there at home. Thank you for joining us at Rolling Hills Library in St. Joseph, Missouri, and a special welcome to all the classes at Riverside School in Wathena. This is something new for us to have classes and families joining us, so that's really exciting. Hi, thank you. So you are here to learn about bats, and we have a fabulous person to tell you about them. Shelly Cox is a naturalist at Remington Nature Center here in St. Joseph, and she has done programs with us before, and maybe you know her also from your family visits or your classroom talks. So I'm going to pass it over to Shelly, and we will get going with her.
All right, are we good to go?
I think we're good to go. Thank you, Shelly.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. When Anali asked me if I would do a presentation on bats, I was so happy to accept because bats are one of my absolute favorite animals. And I know when I tell people that, you know, you sometimes get some weird and strange looks, like, why do you like bats? And I think that for me, I like them because I know the benefits that they provide. I think they're very unique animals. I mean, how many flying mammals do we have, right? They're it. But people look at you kind of strange because they think bats are scary. And so typically at Halloween, we like to talk about scary things, right? We talk about bats. So what comes to mind when we think about bats? Does anybody have an idea what comes to mind when you think about bats? Somebody want to unmute and tell me?
We have a bunch of bats in our attic.
You do, and that is very typical, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, why they're in your attic and why so many people see them there. And not even just your attic, we see them in all sorts of places, in human buildings, human structures. But when we think about a bat, and we're thinking scary, and we're thinking Halloween, what are we thinking? How about vampires? Do we think about vampires? And so movie media and things have taught us that vampires are really scary and they're creepy and they're going to turn into this blood-sucking monster. And that's just not true. And while there are vampire bats in the world, there are 3 different species of vampire bats. They all live in South America, Central America, not likely to make it to the Midwest for sure. And they don't feed on humans. They're feeding on the blood of large mammals like cows. And so a vampire bat, when he's feeding on a cow, he lands on that cow's leg, he takes a teeny tiny little bite, and he's only taking a very small amount of blood, and the cow doesn't even know he's been bitten. So there's certainly not the crazy, creepy things that we see in movies and stuff. And so in Missouri and in Kansas, I know we have some classrooms from Kansas. In Kansas and Missouri, and in most of the United States, our bats are insect-eating bats. So when you think about these flying mammals, they're out at night, they're eating insects, and a bat, and I'm going to hold one up here, a bat about this size, and so this is, you can see my hand, I don't have a really large hand, so he's about hand size with his wingspan, or a little bigger. He is going to eat about 3,000 to 4,000 insects in a single night. That's one bat. So if you have a colony like you might have living in your attic that might be 10, 15 or more bats, and you start doing the math and you add every single bat eating 3,000 or 4,000 insects, that is billions and billions of insects that are being eaten in a single night by all these colonies of bats. And so I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a fan of mosquitoes. I don't really like a lot of bugs flying around my face when I'm outside in the evening trying to enjoy a walk or something. So bats are really our friends. They're eating tons of stuff. And in fact, in the United States, 70% of bats eat insects. There is a colony of bats in, I believe it's San Antonio in Bracken Cave. They have over 20 million freetailed bats. So 20 million bats times 4,000 each eating insects. That's a lot of insects being eaten every night. So for that alone, they're hugely beneficial. We do have bats that are nectar bats. They're pollinating bats. And there's bats that eat all sorts of things. We even have bats that eat frogs. So it's really, really cool to know that all over the world, these bats are eating a tremendous amount of different diets and that they are helping us control these insect populations. So does anybody have any questions before we move on to something different? Any questions about diet? Have you seen any insects eating? Who's ever been outside at night and looked at a pole light, a light at night, and there's bugs flying all around it? And have you seen a bat? Have you seen a bat eating those insects? Well, let me tell you something really cool about bats and these insects. Who's ever seen these giant moths? Pretty good sized moths. They like to fly and flutter around the lights at night. Bats use something called echolocation, and especially insect eating bats. If you're a nectar eating bat, that flower is not going anywhere. You don't need echolocation. But if you are an insect eating bat, you need that echolocation in order to hone in on your food, find your food, and catch your food. So what's really crazy is these bats, they're sending out a signal, this echolocation. It's a very high-pitched signal that humans can't hear. And so it's bouncing off of a moth, and then it comes back to the bat, and the bat gets an image in his mind of food. He knows that food is there. This echolocation works so well that he'll just boop, 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 and it boop, boop, boops right back to him, and he can hone in on that moth and catch it. So what's really neat though is the moths know this. So many of the moths, they feel that echolocation, or they hear it, or they sense it. And as soon as they feel that echolocation or hear it bouncing off of them, guess what the moth does? It drops from the sky. So when the bat flies in to get his meal, it disappeared. And I've actually seen this. I have seen this in action. I was out hiking one night. There was a pole light nearby, and there was tons and tons of bugs. And I'm watching these bats just zooming in and catching all these insects. And all of a sudden, a moth literally just fell from the sky. And then a bat zoomed right across where it was. So I knew what had happened. He was trying to catch his food, but the moth has figured out a way to avoid it. So it's really kind of a neat thing that's playing out there. So they don't always get their meal. And then we've been told that they eat tons and tons of mosquitoes. And while this is true, they do like mosquitoes, they will eat mosquitoes, but typically they're gonna go for bigger food. It's just like us, you know, we go to the buffet, we have all this food laid out in front of us. How many of us are ordering a salad? Probably not very many. So let's think about it in terms of that. The mosquito is like the salad. The moth is like the buffet. So he's gonna go for that. It's gonna take just as much energy for him to catch that much larger insect and get a lot more energy from it when he eats it. And it's gonna take the same amount of energy to catch a teeny tiny mosquito. So he's gonna have to eat a lot of mosquitoes to equal that moth that he can catch using the same energy. So you're typically gonna see them eating moths, larger food than you will the mosquitoes, but that doesn't mean they aren't eating the mosquitoes, and it doesn't mean they aren't helping us get those mosquito numbers down, which is definitely a good thing. We don't like those mosquitoes. So that's how bats are doing around here. They're honing in on those insects, they're eating those insects. And so we talked about them being mammals. How many of you ever heard the term flying rat or flying mouse? Have you ever heard that when somebody describes a bat? They're just a flying mouse. Well, they sort of look like a mouse. They're tiny like a mouse, most of them. They are furry, of course, like a mouse. They make little squeaking noises like a mouse. Teeny tiny little feet like a mouse. But they have something that mice don't have. What's that, guys? What do they have?
Wings.
Wings, that's right. You don't see any flying mice, they're bats. And they're in a completely different family. Mice are in the rodent family. They have yellow teeth, they chew and gnaw on things to keep those teeth filed down. They are rodents. And then bats are in a family called Chiroptera, and that means hand wing. That is exactly what that translates into. And so they very much have a wing that's like a hand. Just like your hand has a thumb and all of your fingers, so does a bat wing. A bat wing has a thumb, and fingers. They're just very elongated. And then in between is this membrane, or what some people might call webbing. And I'm going to hold up a picture so you can see. It's kind of glaring, guys. Are you okay seeing this? So you can see right here, you would have like an elbow, and then these would be the fingers right here. And then in between those fingers are this membrane. And it's that membrane that allows them to get lift, to be able to fly, to maneuver, to dip and dive, and to catch things. These are very, very, very beneficial to the bat, right? He's not going to get along without them. But then sometimes these membranes get torn, and they can still fly. I mean, provided the tear is not too bad, they can still fly with a little tear in their wing, and it will heal over time. So this is what makes a bat unique, and it's also what makes it nothing like a rodent. It's not a rodent at all. Okay, so we hit a little bit on echolocation, we hit a little bit on feeding, and so then we can talk a little bit about non-insect eating bats. In Missouri, we have 14 species of bats. Every single one of them are insect eating bats. But when you travel to other parts of our country, like say the Southwest, where they have cactus and other flowers in the desert, then you're starting to get into bats that are more of the pollinating bats or the nectar eating bats. And they're going to come down at those cactuses at night, those cacti, and they're going to use these very long tongues. Again, another adaptation. The bat has echolocation as an adaptation. The nectar eating bats have this very long tongue. This tongue allows them to dip into those flowers and lap up that nectar. And then you can imagine, just like butterflies and other things that are spreading pollen around, these bats are doing the same thing. So they've landed on these flowers, they've lapped up that sugary nectar, and then they fly to another flower, and they're carrying pollen in their fur. They're carrying it on them. So then when they nectar at that next flower, they're dropping off that pollen, which is pollinating these flowers. And there are a lot of flowers in the Southwest and other places in the world that are strictly pollinated by bats. There's such an adaptation between the plant and the bat that's the only thing that pollinates that plant. So I think that's kind of cool. Our little Batman's over here flying his wings. I love it. I love it. Are we all ready for Halloween tomorrow? Okay, so bats, you talked about having bats in your attic. And so in Missouri, we have a bat, and I will hold it up here. I have some examples of it. And guys, I'm sorry for a glare. We have a window in here, and I know it's kind of hard. But these are big brown bats. And I don't know if this looks correct for you guys. It's kind of backwards to me, but this is a large adult. And then all these little ones that you see here are babies. This baby and this baby belong to her. They were hers, and then these were found. So what happens is in the fall, bats mate before they go into hibernation. But the crazy thing is they don't get pregnant until spring. So in the spring, usually about April or so, they're going to get pregnant. And then in June, they're going to have babies. And then by August, the babies are weaned and flying on their own and away from mom. So they grow very quick. Like all mammals, they have fur, but what else do mammals have that sets them apart from other animals? They may know. I think we have a third grade class. Does our third grade class know? What do mammals have? They have milk. So our bat also has milk. She's nursing her young. She's going to carry them with her underneath these wings. She'll wrap her wings around them. She'll protect them. She will nurse them that way. She can fly with them on her if they're small enough. And keep in mind, guys, bats are not very big, right? The bats in Missouri are not very big. You can see with her wings spread, this is how big she is. So she's not really large. So when she has those babies, they're not going to be very big. So when a baby bat is born, it is the size of my first knuckle right here. It's that tiny. So she has this teeny tiny baby that has no hair. Its eyes aren't open. It's helpless. It's depending on her. They're going to nurse and they're going to grow very quickly. So by the time it goes from a newborn that's super tiny, 2 months later, 8 weeks later, it's flying and it's on its own. So they grow very fast. Mom has very rich milk. And so what's going on when they're in your attic is big brown bats, like that was, they are roosting bats. These are bats that are in the winter hibernating in attics, hibernating in churches, old buildings. I even know somebody who has a wine cellar and he has bats get in his wine cellar. That's underground. And so they will hibernate anywhere they can in order to get out of the winter weather. Their heartbeat slows way down, their breathing slows way down. They go into a very, very deep trance-like sleep, and they cannot be disturbed. If you have a colony of bats in your attic in the winter and you continually disturb them, they'll die. They will die. They spend all summer and early fall eating as much food as they can, putting on as much weight as they can. Just like most animals that go into hibernation, they've got to put on a lot of weight. That weight has to see them through the winter because they are not going to be eating. They're not out hunting. There are no bugs in the winter. So they've piled on all this weight. All of that fat that they've stored up has to see them through from November until April. That's a long time without eating, right? So every time that you wake them up, they're using up fat. They're using up those reserves that they've just accumulated. They start flying around, they're disturbed, they're scared, and then they settle in again. Okay, they've just used energy, didn't they? They've used up a lot of energy. So then a few weeks later, you disturb them again. They use up a bunch more energy, and before you know it, they have nothing left. So if you have them in your attic or you have them somewhere in the winter, it's best to just leave them alone. And then in the spring, if you want them out, that's the time to evict them and figure out how to get them out of your house, but not in the winter. Not only if you throw them outside, they're going to freeze to death, but if you keep bothering them, they're going to starve to death. So they've packed on all this weight. They've made it through the winter. Now it's spring, and they're going to be getting pregnant. They're going to have their babies. And so then we have separate areas where you're going to find your bats. You're going to have what's called a rookery. And what a rookery is a colony of mama bats with baby bats. Okay? So I'm going to try to hold up a picture here, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it really good. These are all babies. Okay? These are freetailed bats, like we talked about, that live in that cave in Texas. And so these teeny tiny little bats are all hanging out together. They're all babies. They're hanging out together. Mom's just left the cave. She's going to go out and feed. She has to keep up her energy. She's nursing babies. And a nursing bat eats almost 5,000 bats or insects a night. How crazy is that? So she's out hunting for all these insects. She flies back to the cave in a couple hours. She's checking on the kids. So how does she find them? Look at all these. Those aren't all hers. So how is she going to find her 1 or 2 babies amongst all of this? She knows the sound of her kids' cry. Every time her bat makes a noise, she recognizes it. Just like us as parents, we recognize the call or cry of our child. She does too. So when she flies back into that cave, her baby's going to start chirping, and she knows right where that baby's at. She will grab that baby, nurse the baby, then she will go back out and hunt some more. So this is going to go on all night long. Every hour, every 2 hours, she's going to be taking care of these babies, checking in on them. So then let's say something happens and the rookery gets disturbed. So what do the babies, how does mama handle that? She's going to move them. She's going to move them. She'll know if it's not safe there. She'll take those babies. If they're too big, she army crawls with them. They will climb onto her fur, and she literally takes those elbows and she climbs and crawls with them. If they're small enough, she'll fly with them. So that's kind of a neat thing. She knows when danger's there and to get them away. And then some people ask me, well, how many babies do bats have? Typically, they're going to have 1 to 2. They can definitely have twins. Sometimes they'll have 3. But there is an exception in Missouri. There is a bat that routinely has a lot of babies. And I'm going to say what that one is. That's this one. This is the eastern red bat. Okay, I'm trying to get the glare away, guys. I really am. Okay, so the eastern red bat, and again, fairly small bat, but these guys have 3, 4, 5, even 6 babies. So how does a teeny tiny bat take care of all of these babies? And I'll tell you the story behind this one. This was found in St. Joseph, and animal control had found the mom, and she was dead. Something had happened. We don't know if the cold got her. We don't know if a cat got her. We don't know. We just don't know. So something happened to her. And then when they picked her up, under her wings were all 4 babies. And the babies were still alive. Super tiny. And I tried to save them, but I couldn't. It was very sad. So all 4 babies did not make it. But we were able to show you just how tiny, and you can see just how tiny these guys are. So you can imagine when they're born, these were probably 3 or 4 weeks old. So you can imagine when they're born just how super, super tiny that they really are and how dependent on mom they are. But she did her best to look after them, but something happened. And so some will have 1 or 2 babies. Some might have as many as 6. It just depends on the bat. So that's a lot of mouths to feed. It's a lot of taking care of young ones. Requires a lot of energy, again, back to all that feeding that they've got to do. The really unique thing about the red bat versus the brown bat, we talked about, he likes to live in attics, holds together in clusters. He's a colony bat. The red bat's not. The red bat is solitary. The red bat is migratory. It's going to head south in the cold weather, much like birds do. Then when the warmer weather comes back, so does the bat. And then they like to hang out in trees. So they're going to roost up in a tree. She will hang, they hang upside down. All bats hang upside down. She's going to hang from her feet in a tree. She's that rusty red color. So as she's hanging there from her feet, a rusty red color, what do you think she looks like? They may have a guess. You think she looks like a leaf? She does. It makes it very, very hard to see her. You wouldn't think so because she's furry, but when she folds those wings in, and she's very tiny, and she's hanging upside down under the leaves, and the leaves are swaying, and she's swaying with them, she looks like a leaf. It's very good camouflage. She's very protected up there, but she's not a colony bat. She's not going to hang out in these huge, huge colonies like those brown bats will or the freetailed bats will. So that's a little bit unique, and it's unique that she's migratory. And we do have several migratory bats that come in and out of Missouri. One is the silver hair bat. I don't have a picture of it. I wish I did. They're a very pretty little bat, about yay big, and they're a really dark charcoal color, almost black, and they have silver tips on their hair. And that's where they get their name of silver hair bat or silver bat. And I had one experience with one, it's been several years ago. I was leading trail hikes, and some kids had noticed a bat on the side of a tree. And it wasn't really unusual. It was a shagbark hickory tree. That bark kind of flakes off so the bats can hide up underneath there. But it was unusual to see it in the morning in daylight, because we know bats are nocturnal, right? So here we are, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, it's daylight, and here's a bat on the side of the tree. So we went over, we looked at it, and we left it alone and went away. Later on in the day, I was leading another hike, and the bat was still there. And I thought, that's just not right. Something's going on here. So I went and got one of the local professors. He was a mammologist who studies mammals. And we went down there, and the bat was dead. It was stuck to the tree, hanging on, but it wasn't alive. So we tried to figure out what was going on. And after we studied the bat, we figured out it starved to death. So here's what happens. In the spring, we know that migratory bats are going to fly back into our area. So what happens in the spring around here in Missouri and Kansas? The weather's all over the place, right? One day it might be 70 degrees and it's sunny. Next day it might be 45 and it's snowing. The weather is crazy in the fall and in the spring in our area. So the bat in his southern home for the winter, it warmed up. He's like, okay, that's a signal. I need to head north. So he spends days and days and days using up so much energy to get back to Missouri. He flies into Missouri, the temperatures drop. It got cold, very cold. So when it's that cold, we know our bats are insect-eating bats. There are no insects. There was no food for him to be able to start building up that fat that he had used up during that migration. So that was what he died of. He just didn't have anything to eat when he got here. So while that's very sad, it does illustrate just how dependent these animals are on their food source, and their food source is dependent on weather conditions. So that's why we cannot disturb them. We have to leave them alone, or they will starve to death. And I will tell you a funny story, or at least I kind of think it's funny. My mom didn't think so. This is another thing that kind of set me on a path for loving bats. When I was 10 years old, I had a friend over to spend the night, and the next morning we were out riding bikes, and I noticed something on the side of the wall at my neighbor's house. And it was about this big, and it was cute, and it was brown and furry, and I was about the animals back then, trust me. So I went home and I got a shoebox, and I scooped it into the shoebox, and I took it home, and I said, Mom, you've got to see what I found. This is amazing. I don't know what it is, but it's cute. I took the lid off, and its wings were coming out. My mom screamed so loudly and jumped up on the table and banished me and my bat to the backyard, and I had to let it go. But I thought, any animal that can get that kind of a reaction out of my mother, I really like that animal. And I have been obsessed with bats ever since. So they do sometimes show up in weird situations. You might see them out during the day like I did. Please don't scoop them into a shoebox and bring them home. That's probably not a good idea. Bats can and do carry diseases, and those diseases can be transferred to humans. Although it's not likely, it's possible. They have very, very sharp teeth. These things can bite. They have needle-like teeth. I don't know, let's see, I might have, okay, bear with me guys. Let's see if you can see the teeth on this thing. Can you guys see the teeth on him? Can you see how sharp these are? And maybe on the skeleton, I don't know if you can see that very well. But they have really, really sharp needle-like teeth. They will bite if provoked or scared. Just like anything will protect itself, they will too. And so these diseases that could be transmitted to humans are going to be transmitted through that bite. So it's always best if you find one out during the day. We know they're nocturnal. They should not be out during the day. That means something's happened. It could be the bat was injured. It could be it was too cold at night and the cold knocked it down out of the sky. It could be that it's sick. So leave it alone. Call animal control, call an adult in your life who can maybe help you safely remove it if it's in an area it shouldn't be where other kids could find it. But always use gloves or a big thick towel, something like that to move it, and don't move it yourself. Ask an adult to help you or get animal control, because we don't want anybody bitten. We don't want to take that risk that somebody could get sick. Okay. So guys, I don't know, how are we on time, Anali?
We're okay. You can go ahead. If anyone needs to leave, they can, but you can continue. And then if you want to have some open questions at the end, that's up to you, Shelly. Thank you.
I think what we'll do, since we're about 35 minutes in, let's go ahead and start some questions, which might generate some, feedback here on things that people might want to know.
Sounds good. So those of you watching at home or in the classroom, if you want to go ahead and unmute, and teachers, you can decide how you want to take the questions, either directly or yourselves. So we'll open it up to questions. What do you want to ask Shelly?
have a question.
Okay.
You said there's 2 different places you can find them in a rookery, and then what's the other?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hit on that. The other is just going to be their normal roosting site. So generally speaking, males and unpregnant females won't hang out where the rookery's at. So even in a single attic, you might have just one corner of the attic that's what would be the rookery. And then another area of the attic will be where everybody else hangs out. So generally speaking, they don't intermix with the rookery. The females are pretty protective of the babies. So that's basically what's going to happen. There's also places, I think in Texas as well, there's Congress Bridge, and that's a rookery. And so underneath that bridge, tens of thousands of these free-tailed bats, mamas, they leave their babies up underneath that bridge, and then they fly out from underneath that bridge to hunt at night. And everybody I've talked to keeps telling me, you have got to go to Congress Bridge and see this. But there's tens of thousands of these babies up under the bridge, tucked away from other bats and from danger. Okay, do we have any other questions?
I have a young man who would like to know the lifespan of the bats.
Bats can live up to 20 years, depending on the species, but most of them in Missouri have the ability to live 15 to 20 years.
Are you 15 yet, Declan? Oh, can live longer than you can then, or than you have. Thank you.
Yeah, they can live a very, very long time. I mean, obviously illness and other things can have a big impact on that, but if all goes well, you could expect 15 to 20 years. And I do believe there's some species in the world I read that could live as much as 30 or 40 years. I'm not sure what they are, but that would be quite a long lifespan for a small mammal.
So one thing I've heard is if they're in your house, if you throw something up in the air and then it drops, they'll follow it. Is that true? And is that because of the moth like dropping out of the sky?
I don't know that that's true. I wouldn't want to be throwing things at them because you might injure them, but I don't think that that's really going to affect their echolocation. It's funny, a friend of mine, she was hiking down at Bluff Woods, and Onali, I think you know her, Luann Cadden. Okay, she tells this story and I love it. She was hiking and she could see a bat up ahead and it was coming right at her. And so she just stopped in the middle of the trail to see what this bat was going to do. And it buzzed right over the top of her head. She felt its wings. It just scraped right across the top of her head. And so she was very brave. She stood there, you know, and she said, you know, I got to thinking, she said, as a human, I attract insects. You know, we attract gnats, we attract mosquitoes, those things come after us. So the bat was honing in on those bugs that were around her. And it wasn't coming at her directly, because people will tell you stories that they'll dive after things like that, or they'll come at your hair, they'll get caught in your hair. None of those things are going to happen. Bats have excellent echolocation, which gives them excellent eyesight, so to speak. And their eyesight's as good as ours. I mean, they can see just the same as we can. And so they're going to fly. If they're coming right at you, just stand there. If you can, if you're brave enough, just stand there, and it's going to just be eating things that are hovering around you. And in your house, I don't know that there's any truth to that they're going to dive after something that you've tossed up in the air or that they see. I've never known of it to happen, but it's just, again, it's one of those things that gets started that, you know, like, you know, all bats suck your blood. And I mean, there's just all kinds of crazy things that you hear. So. Any other questions? Does anybody know what the largest bat in the world is? I know we have 3 classrooms. Does anybody have a guess?
Kamani, what's your guess? You had your hand raised. Do you have an idea?
I forgot what I was.
You forgot. Trinity?
Okay, well, how about if I hold up a picture and then you tell me if you guys know what this is? Have you ever seen this on a nature show? Do you guys know what this is? He kind of has a dog face, doesn't he? Right. He's called a flying fox or fruit bats. These are the fruit bats. These bats are so large, they have 6-foot wingspans. 6 feet. So we talked about those bats that live around here that maybe are hand size or a little bigger with their wings spread out. So you take a bat that's roughly this size, and then we're going to stretch it out 6 feet. That's a huge bat, but he only weighs about 2 pounds. So he doesn't weigh very much. He's all wings. He's all size as far as that goes, but not a lot of weight to him. And he's one of those fruit bats. He, again, like that nectar eating bat, he does not need echolocation. He's going to fly into those trees, roost in the trees, and eat all that fruit. But guess what he does for us? We know the nectar eating bats are pollinating, and we know the insect eating bats are getting rid of the bugs we don't like. The fruit bat is planting trees. He's planting trees. When he eats that fruit and he flies around at night, well, after you eat, you go to the bathroom, right? So in his poo, he's leaving the seeds behind, and trees and flowers and other plants are getting planted. So he helps the ecosystem that way. He's a tree planter. And he's cleaning up a lot of that decaying, old, rotten fruit, too, that's laying around. So he's pretty cool. Does anybody know what the smallest bat in the world is? Anybody have a guess? Do you know? Raise your hand up over there. What is it?
A baby bat.
A baby. Well, they are those. You're right. You got me there. But there is a species of bat out there that's considered the smallest in the world. Does anybody know what it's called? It's called the bumblebee bat. His wingspan's this big. It's super tiny. Full grown, he's about this big. He doesn't get very big at all. He weighs less than a penny. So he's super, super tiny. So bats cover all ranges. They're going to have that super tiny bumblebee bat to that ginormous fruit bat. So they're all over the place in size. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a lot of questions, but
Good, hit me with them. We'll see if we can figure them out.
so how do they fly? Do they need to climb up on something and drop, or can they take off from the ground?
They can take off from the ground. I always had somebody tell me they will not take off from the ground. Yes, they will. I had one brought in. We had it laying on a table. It was on a flat surface, and that son of a gun just took right off and flew. But most of the time, they do have to be on something. So if they're grounded outside, you find one that maybe something swatted at and knocked it down, or the cold got it down for some reason. If you can use gloves, get it to a tree. Just put it on the side of a tree, and then yes, they will let go. They'll open those wings out and then fly. So typically, yes, they need to be on the side of something to let go and fly, but not always, because I witnessed it myself. And yeah, that was interesting.
I know my sister is Batgirl because she had a bat when she was born. There was a bat house when she was born.
She had a bat house when she was born.
No,
People.
There was a bat in the house when she was born.
Oh, well, see, that might be her spirit animal then, right?
Yeah, she got a stuffy that is a bat.
See, that's going to be her spirit animal for her whole life. Is going to be bats.
We
love it though.
We bought some bat houses, but we're not really sure how and where is the best place to hang them.
I have really mixed opinions and mixed feelings about bat houses. I have 3 of them up at home. I've had them up for 20 years. I've never seen a bat in them. And I know so many people, and I've moved them around. You know, I've talked to people, oh, well, have them near water, or have them by a pole light, or have them 30 feet up in a, and I've done all the things. We've moved them around numerous times. Nothing seems to work. So if anybody has bats using a bat house, I would love to talk to them and know how they're getting the bats in the houses. Because mine are using hollow trees, they're using other things, which is great, I still have them, but the houses are not working at all. So I have mixed feelings about it. I would encourage people to do it just in case it worked, because obviously we want to help them in any way we can. But I also tell people, don't be too disappointed if it doesn't work, because it seems to not really work well for whatever reason. I don't know. I mean, theoretically it should. I mean, it's providing them what they need, and especially the colony bats, like the big browns and the little browns. You'd think they'd love that nice little dark area where they can all gather, but I don't know. So any other questions?
Okay, one more, I guess. Oh, do you want to ask something? And say something. What do you have to ask?
Why do cats eat bats?
Cats like to chase things. Cats are predators. And it's even like, you think about a lion or think about a tiger, they like to pounce and chase and hunt and stalk. So does your cat. That's bred into your cat. And so when they see something move, it triggers something in their brain, this predatory response. And so they immediately want to go after it, even if they're not hungry. It's just a predatory response that cats have to something that moves. So a bat, that's just an oversized flying toy for them. So they see one and they're going to swat at it. A lot of times they will damage the wings really bad. Sometimes they'll get it down and then they'll bite it. And cats have a lot of bacteria in their mouth. So when they bite something like a bat, it can actually make the bat very sick. And the bacteria can. But it's just bred into a cat. It's just who they are. It's no different than them chasing down a mouse or a rat or a bird or anything else that they like to chase down. How about some of my classrooms? We have lots and lots of kids. Does anybody have questions?
And I think they had to leave. They had another event. Some of them were voting for a class president, but there was a note from one of the teachers saying that the first graders from Riverside missed coming to hear you in person in the fall because of everything going on. So they were really pleased to join you for this today.
I'm so glad. I know we had them on the schedule. It's just this virus and everything has had so many things messed up this year for everybody, but I'm so glad they joined today.
Well, we're glad to have all of you here, those of you who are at home and of course the classes. Take a look on our calendar online for other events that are coming up. We would love to have Shelly back again because she's fabulous, as you know. Shelly, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you all of you for joining us. If you have any questions for Rolling Hills Library, give us a call or get online and we'll help to connect you with some more resources. And
come visit the Nature Center. We're open, we're here. You're welcome to come and look around the Nature Center. And if I'm here, grab me and we'll have a conversation about stuff.
There you go. And as you saw, she has lots of fabulous things in her office and the center as well. So do check out Remington Nature Center in St. Joe. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.